And so you're acting either as a faithful servant of God or as an enemy of God and of all God's saints. It's one or the other.
I do apologize to disturb you. We just actually went successfully YouTube Live. We're on point 6. At some point, can we come back?
Presently raging through America and the world, but the confusion and misunderstanding by everybody about everything. When people say contradictory and arbitrary things that cannot be supported, way in a world of fog. Well, that's what we're trying to do. Anyway, the points that we've gone over, discussed in the first 7 days of our programming. First, God created the cosmos for his glory, not for man's. Second, the jewel of creation is man, made in his image. Not because we deserve it, but because that serves God's purposes in glorifying himself. Now, we can be grateful for that. And even those who hate him can be grateful that they have life and that they're human beings and not slugs. 3, although in no sense the author of evil, God ordained evil, Adam's fall. 4, in Adam, the entire creation fell, not only Adam and Eve, but all subsequent progeny of Adam and Eve for the rest of time. 5, as a result of the fall, God pronounced the curse of enmity between the seed of the woman, that is Jesus Christ, and all those in him who will spend eternity with God, and the seed of the serpent, the remainder of humanity. This can be called the great antithesis. 6, all subsequent human experience is an outworking of this enmity. Everything. 7th, the unregenerate are without excuse. They know God, but suppress the truth in culpable self-deceit. Okay. Now, yesterday we were talking about the seed of the serpent. And specifically, we were talking about those who hold a scientific materialist view or a naturalistic view of reality. Well, I wonder what that could be. How about God? But if you deny God, you don't have a cause for the effect. Take this pencil and I let go, it'll fall. Now, I know why it'll fall. It'll fall because of what we call the law of gravity. Well, yeah, but what's the law of gravity? I mean, people got together and passed a law, and so gravity has to do what we say it has to do, or we just observe that's how it's his creation. It's also an observation about God himself. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Now, if you deny a God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and you claim that everything just happens by chance and there's no way to know, then you can't know what's going to happen. And if, in fact, you think you do know, you know because you're surreptitiously smuggling into your belief system principles from my belief system. I believe in a God who's the same yesterday, today, and forever. But if you're a naturalistic materialist, you do not. You do not believe in a God at all. You believe in a world that just is by chance. And if it just is by chance, then you can't explain any of these laws. You simply accept them. But you accept them under false pretenses. That is, you accept them as part of my world, but they're unexplainable by the principles of your world. Now, that's where we ended up yesterday. If you have questions about this, by the way, please send them to me. I'd be delighted to answer any questions that you have. Believe me, we have the not only the moral, but the intellectual high ground in dealing with unbelievers as Christians. So don't ever feel like, hey, they're the smart guys. No. They're fools. That's what God says. They're fools. The third foundation stone of science that naturalists tacitly abrogate in denying God and embracing chance as their cosmological agent is reason itself. Matter, energy, time, and motion comprise the cosmos for naturalistic materialists, but the laws of logic are immaterial, universal, timeless, and absolute. And that creates a terrible contradiction for the naturalistic worldview. Only God, who is omniscient, immaterial, universal, timeless, and absolute, can account for the laws of logic. To argue that those laws are invented by men is to posit the absurdity of a universe which, before the existence of men, could have both existed and not existed at the same time and in the same sense. You say, well, no. Well, if we made the laws of logic, if there were no laws of logic, and if the law of non-contradiction is a law of logic, then it didn't exist before we did. But we know that before we existed, the cosmos existed. Even naturalists believe that. And so obviously, the laws of logic had to exist before men did, which means that their transcendence exists before us and outside of us. If logic is conventional, if it is a construct of men, then necessarily before men existed, logic did not exist, and there would have been nothing to prevent contradiction. Its proponents are forced to employ some form of smoke and mirrors to distract attention from their cosmological failure in order to suppress the truth of their knowledge of God. That's our point number 7, that they're without excuse. They suppress the truth in self-deceit. And they deceive themselves. But it's culpable. It's guilty self-deceit because they do know the truth. I can tell you that in my own life, after I became a Christian, it was clear to me that I had not learned some new information, that I always had known that God existed and he wasn't happy with me. But I had suppressed that truth and denied it, deceiving myself, because I thought I really believed that God didn't exist. It wasn't. In essence, they seek to borrow intellectual capital from legitimate operational science and surreptitiously use it to validate excursions into historical science through equivocation by conflation. What does that mean? Sounds nice, huh? Being orderly and yet being a chance cosmos. We're conflating two ideas. We're equivocating and assuming things that evidence that is not in existence. Since operational science has demonstrable truth-seeking value and historical science relies on invalid philosophical assumptions, by conflating of historical science as science, they make the unsupported assertion, no one can know how the cosmos came into being, but I know Christian theists are wrong. The irrationality of this statement is sublime for at least 2 reasons. First, if it is true that no one can know, then how do they come to know that? They may know that they do not know, but to know that no one can know would require exhaustive knowledge that only omniscience can have. God. Second, if it is true that they are merely confessing that they do not know, then how can they know the Christian theist is wrong? If you tell me that you don't know the answer to something that I say I do know the answer to, then how can you tell me that my answer is wrong unless you can show me some way in which it is? And they do not. They just say you're wrong. It's an arbitrary statement. Philosophically, once they have denied the creator, whether they intended or not, scientific naturalists are forced into the only remaining camp: creation and development by blind, mindless, purposeless chance. Restricting themselves, however, to a chance creation uncomfortably requires a miracle of unimaginable magnitude while denying a miracle worker. Doing so necessitates an indomitable measure of credulity in the face of all evidence to the contrary. Credulity is blind faith. What they accuse us of. That is why they openly avoid admitting their chance cosmology, preferring instead to blow smoke to obfuscate the truth. On this point, we, as those who seek the truth, must fan away the clouds of smoke and press them to face the cosmological question and admit that they accept chance as their cosmological foundation. Then we must confront them with the absurdity of their faith in chance.
Sir?
While secular philosophers are aware of the danger of asserting a chance cosmology, both the God-denying man on the street and the God-denying intelligibility. As mentioned earlier, the laws of logic by which humans think and communicate intelligibly are vitiated by chance cosmology because the necessary precondition for those laws to exist is the very order that chance destroys. Contradiction. We can know nothing. Nothing. So if you're going to base your cosmology, your explanation of how the cosmos came into existence on chance, then you deny the possibility of even thinking. And so, in effect, you cannot tell me anything about anything because you can't think. Okay, excuse me just a moment. I'll plug this in. As mentioned earlier, the laws of logic by which universal, timeless, absolute, unchanging, and cannot logically exist in a world limited to the natural alone. They cannot. You have to have a God. You have to have God who is rational and who is omniscient and who is eternal and who is all-powerful. A God sufficient to have created out of nothing all that we see, including yourself. You are the most fabulous example of God's creativity that there is. I mean, you can think, you can talk, you can reason, that mankind is not able to copy in any way at all. Although we are quite marvelous in how we have been made, stand on God's lap to slap God's face. Because if God does not exist, he cannot think, he cannot, okay? As I said last week, I had a friend who wrote me one time discussing truth, and he said, there is no truth. And I wrote back to him and I said, is that true? And he didn't reply. I can't figure out why. But you can see that he's hoist on his own petard, as the old English used to say. A petard was an explosive device. And if it blew up, you can't touch him, you can't smell him, you can't look at him, you can't feel him, you can't hear him. They must be timeless and universal. To argue that they are conventional is absurd. That would mean that men by agreement could change or suspend them by consensus, or perhaps even by majority vote. Well, maybe we'll change not only the law of logic by majority vote, but even the law of gravity. And today, everybody can jump off tall buildings in a single bound and not hurt themselves.
Wait, did I miss? Superman's here?
Superman thinks he's here, but he's not. So don't go jumping off tall buildings in a single bound, figuring you won't hurt yourself. You will. Therefore, positing a chance universe with true, unchanging, universal laws of logic is a monstrously absurd, arbitrary statement resting on contradiction as its firm foundation. How's that for quicksand? They'd like to do that. However, the cosmos' observable internal coherence denies its eternality, the all that ever was portion of Sagan's Godhead. The law of entropy, which I think is the second law of thermodynamics, says that, quote, matter and energy can only be changed in one direction, that is, from usable to unusable, or from available to unavailable, or from ordered to disordered. Why? Well, think about it. Everyone agrees that the universe contains a finite amount of total energy. Everybody agrees with that, in both usable and unusable forms. Combined with the law of entropy, this fact points undeniably to a beginning because there remains usable energy in the cosmos. It is impossible to have been subtracting usable energy eternally from a finite amount of energy, any energy left. Well, how do we know there's any energy left? Well, how about the energy you take in listening to me right now? How about the energy I take in speaking to you? That's clearly proof that there remains energy in the universe. But if you subtract eternally from a finite amount of anything, you would have run out of that anything long ago. Although long ago doesn't even mean anything when you're talking about infinity. Now we're getting into categories that are really tough for human beings. Finite. It began at some point. I mean, even now they're saying the Big Bang is the point in time at which it began. So they agree there has to have been a point as all there ever was, beginning as it did at a point in time. Before that point in time, it was not. If there was a time when it was not, then it is false to assert that it was anything, all that ever was, when it simply was not, because it did not exist yet. Perhaps hoping no one notices the conflation of it still falls short of forever as claimed in all that ever was. In fact, the Big Bang Theory is evidence to the contrary. If truth came to occur, nor does it account for order, purpose, design, information, intelligence, meaning, truth, purpose, etc., that we find in the world. Think about it. How many builders do you know who, in building houses, pile them up into a large pile, and then they put a huge explosive device underneath or entwined all within the building materials, and they set it off and just blows up into this unimaginable explosion, the cosmos. But we laugh at the idea that you would blow up building materials in order to make a house. Design, the list goes on and on. I mean, excuse me? I'm the dummy? Because I believe you can't do that? I'm the dummy? Maybe so. Distract one from a hidden action he is performing with the other hand. He's doing this. Don't look at my left hand. While it is entertaining, neither can cause or explain the other. Chance is the absence of design. Design excludes chance. If you put design and chance in a bottle and you shake them up for 1,000,000 years, you're going to still end up with chance and design as separate categories. They will have produced no new category. You cannot join antithetical concepts. It is a philosophical impossibility. In a word, it's nonsense, absurd. Moreover, in our daily commonplace lives, all evidence of design is used without exception as proof of a designing agent. If someone finds sticks arranged into a perfect geometrical design, for instance, he immediately thinks an intelligent designer is behind it. If you find sticks arranged in a perfect square, you say, well, look at that. Look what the ocean created, or look what the wind and waves created, or look what that storm created last night, a perfect square. Such a fundamental level that you're not even going to think about it. You're just going to assume it. If someone asks, well, how did I get there? You may say, I don't know how I got there. Well, is always set in opposition to design as explanations of observed phenomena, without exception. The conclusions we draw countless times daily without consciously pondering them in analyzing the myriad sensory data input we encounter as we live our lives, is that the phenomena we observe were either caused by some personal agency or alternatives. If it is not one, then it must be the other. We subconsciously perform this analytical task countless times daily. It is as innate to us as breathing.
You just getting warmed up.
I'm just getting warmed up.
Keep going.
Okay. Imagine then a wristwatch separated into its constituent parts. How many times must I can't even get my bed to make itself in the morning. And believe me, I don't take a whole lot of effort in making my bed. You pull back the cover and ooh, this is a made bed. My mother would disown me. But she has passed to her reward. Praise God. Except for a person desperately seeking to suppress the truth that God is his creator, the question about the wristwatch being formed a wristwatch by just throwing the parts together disqualifies itself from thoughtful consideration by its wild implausibility. Each of the parts implies design, Combining them into a working timepiece beggars the idea of its originating by chance. Once again, chance and design are antithetical categories. Imagine further, then, a cosmos of infinitely greater complexity than a wristwatch. The cosmos we live in, maybe. Unless we willfully decide in advance to blind ourselves and accept only natural evidence, nothing. It is a word used to describe randomness, which is the essence of non-purposive disorder. Non-purposive disorder. Well, how do you get design out of non-purposive disorder? Without question, being non-purposive, it lacks the capacity to design. In fact, except for special pleading to bolster the oxymoron known as naturalistic metaphysics,
What's he clean?
uh,
No? No. Sorry.
well, it cleans out the human mind of any rational thinking.
I'll go back to the Peter Gallery.
Okay. Of ascribing design capacity to that which is non-purposive. Because design requires purpose, it is meaningless nonsense to speak of chance design. Well, then how can the naturalist even masterful stroke of duplicity that the God denier plays his ace? Intentionally blinding himself, there's none so blind as he who will not see. He denies design. He says, no, there is no design in the universe. Instead, he says, there's the appearance of design. Wow, that's profound. You mean maybe rational to speak of the chance appearance of design in random, isolated, fragmentary instances. It is absurd to attempt to remake reality by redefining terms. You see, what happens if you insist on this nonsensical idea that there's no real design in the universe, there's only the appearance of design, is that you empty words of meaning. But you see, you can't limit emptying words of meaning to the words that you don't happen to like. As soon as you introduce the concept, they're just tools and there is no absolute truth. Then you end up meandering along a meaningless highway. Identify every example of design as only an appearance of design is to consign reality to the realm of the imagination. Once he has reality and reality itself across the entire spectrum of his experience, thus again destroying the basis for science itself. And not only for science, but for functioning in any way in the world in which he lives, or even for explaining any aspect of the world in which he lives. He has to fragment the world into manageable sections, denying the philosophical underpinnings of what he's doing in order to be able to make some sense of what he's doing, although he's walking right by himself in a concept like a duck, quacks like a duck. As you can see, I'm not terribly original. I use my own material over and over. What the scientific is doing is nothing more than disingenuous, dishonest obfuscation. He's blowing smoke. He's got a big smoke machine so that we don't see what's going on. In a brilliant burst of irrationality, he builds his entire science on the principle of uniform laws of physics while claiming that only the appearance of uniformity exists. So we have only the appearance of reality. We only have the appearance of me or the appearance of you. And are you really philosophically consistent, however, he must explain how to do science while denying the reality of designed uniformity and dealing with a cosmos filled of chance as creator. Scientific materialists may choose to halt the inquiry at the assertion the cosmos simply exists. But it just exists, period. It just exists. Isn't that good enough? I mean, that sounds like good science, huh? And if I go to him and I say, well, explain rocket science, and he'll say, well, it just exists. Well, how do we get a rocket to the moon? Well, we just do. Excuse me, I shouldn't be laughing at this. This is supposed to be serious stuff. They may say they cannot know how it came to exist, so they simply accept its existence. Willfully choosing to ignore cosmology, they assume this fact as their starting point and go from there. not content with simply asserting their cosmological ignorance, evade the question of how that came to occur. If pressed, they simply repeat themselves and look smug, ignoring the fact that for that a very long time is not forever, nor does forever account for design. With all their educational degrees, it appears they expect to dazzle the dummies, us, with their credentials, in lieu of offering convincing proof. In sum, what they are doing is attempting by sleight of hand to coalesce to, then presto, design will automatically pop out. No. What they wish to obscure by obfuscation is that adding unimaginable lengths of time to the equation is a bait and switch tactic intended solely to confuse categories. Scientists? Those guys are really smart. I mean, they've got PhD after their name. They're doing these things? Yes. Time is an entirely different category from design. And most scientists are very bad philosophers. That is, they never examine the philosophical. You got to start with some philosophical basis, because you can't integrate your system of thought otherwise. I mean, I know those words are oftentimes off-putting. Philosophy. Ooh, smart people do philosophy. No, I do philosophy. I'm not very smart. You don't have to be all that smart. You just have to want to be able to make things stick together. Find principles that you can build your thoughts upon that without contradicting yourself or having to make arbitrary statements. Then you make sense of the world around you, is to avoid dealing with the question of the truthfulness of their philosophical assumptions by any such sleight of hand, honest error, quote unquote, or deliberate deception that they may choose. They must be compelled to make their case. You and me, we need to compel them to make their case, which they cannot do. No matter how fine their structure looks, no matter how many well-furnished rooms it has, then when they address the issue of physical origins, cosmology, they magically dispense with cause and effect and tacitly presume uncaused effects. They violate their own science, but they don't want to talk about that. They don't want. And if you ask a paleontologist those questions, he says, "Well, I'm not an astronomer. I don't do that. I'm not a philosopher. I don't do that." Well, yeah, I understand that. But when you're doing your paleontology, you're making some assumptions about the data that you're gathering. And the assumptions that you're making are philosophical in nature. And telling me that you don't do philosophy tells me you do it poorly, not that you don't do it. You either do it well or you do it badly, but everybody does philosophy to one extent or another. Everybody addictions within your system. Your system will destroy. And the other is you can't have unsupported, arbitrary assertions and try to make sense of the world. You really are. And the world will make no sense if you're applying those two principles unless you put God at the center of it as the creator and the one for whom everything was created for his glory. Otherwise, you'll make no sense of anything. That's the basic point of all of this. Forestalled from claiming an infinite regress of cause and effect because the cosmos, what does that mean? Well, an uncaused cause is God. Okay? God causes everything, always was, and he is complete in himself.
Sorry, what was that term?
Aseity. A-S-E-I-T-Y. Well, why does he have to be complete in himself? Well, can you imagine if he's all that is, except for what he has created, then what can he need that exists outside of himself? The physical universe is not coterminous with him. That is to say, this is not pantheism where the universe is God, but the universe is a construct of God, and God supports it in every way, and he fills it in every way. And without his sustaining presence, it's an effect, and we don't know the cause of it. So it's just one of those two choices. Now, if you're a scientific materialist, which choice do you think you're going to make? Are you going to choose the the uncaused cause or the uncaused effect. If you choose the uncaused cause, you're choosing God. If you choose the uncaused effect, then you're trying to distract people from what you're really doing, but you're denying God and you're denying your own science. But if the only choice you have is an uncaused cause and an uncaused effect, even though you deny your own science, if you are in fact a scientific naturalist, if you believe that the cosmos is, all that ever was, and all that ever will be, you necessarily deny God. You cannot accept an uncaused cause. Does that make sense? Because that would be God. That leaves only the uncaused effect, which makes no sense, but it's not as obviously making no sense as for them. He did everything, and he sent his son into the world to redeem the lost, is foolishness to those who are perishing. It's foolishness. Now, if you're a scientist and you hate God, then the idea that God exists is foolishness to you. So for a scientist to accept what he believes with his entire soul is foolishness to him, is never going to happen. He has to be changed from the inside out. God has to change his heart. You and I will never change his heart by just arguing with him. That'll never happen, because what we're saying to him is foolishness. Because to accept the God is to deny his own godhood, which is really what he's defending. To choose door number one, the uncaused cause, and accept an uncaused cause would be tantamount to accepting the creator God, so they dare not the mystery of chance to explain uncaused effects. That's all they're doing. Of course, doing so gives rise to two other serious problems. First, to admit uncaused effects to explain origins introduces an awkward and untidy camel inside the tent of science, the origin of the cosmos. Then how can it then be ruled out of court in explaining any other effect rather than having to find a cause? You understand? I mean, they've ripped the heart out of science itself. This undermines the very cornerstone of science itself, which requires a cause for every effect, tacitly leading to a loss of faith in science and reason, opening the door to the postmodern rejection of truth and reason. Second, once again, chance is not a being who can act as a causal agent or are required in any action. Then chance, lacking these predicates, cannot be the explanation for the action, regardless of how much time is allowed. Asserting time and chance as a causal designer has precisely the same metaphysical legitimacy as magic. Scientific naturalism is, therefore, not an adequate cosmology for several reasons. First, it cannot account for the orderly world in which we live. Second, it fails to cohere internally, contradicting itself on point after point. And at least, if scientific naturalism is false, that leaves only supernaturalism. Failure to squarely face that fact consigns one to a semi-solipsistic view of reality.
Solipsistic, you said?
Yes, solipsism is
The belief that you're the only thing, or
is viewing reality as something that emanates out of you, that there's no reality outside yourself, and that everything is always in terms of yourself. Huh?
I think therefore I am. Is that solipsistic, or no? I should more defining.
Well, no, that's a little bit different.
Well, I'm gonna let it matter, so it doesn't matter to me.
Yes, and I'm sure all of us, when we were small children, went through that period where we wondered if there was any other reality out there but ourselves. Are those all just actors? I mean, wasn't there a movie with the funny man with the?
Talking Jim Carrey, or
Jim Carrey.
Oh, I wonder which one.
Well, a movie where he was in a movie, but he was the movie.
The Truman Show.
The Truman Show. That's right. That's solipsism, by the way. The Truman Show is solipsism.
I mentioned that to you. Like, speaking of the Truman Show, if you, as you know, I mentioned I cut back the live streams. If you live stream as much as I do and say as much incessantly crazy things, I sometimes catch myself thinking I'm still doing a live because it's so frequent, but thank goodness I've cut it back just maybe to show a couple things today.
So you know what? Being a solipsistic universe yourself.
I really wasn't paying attention. I'm in the world by myself here.
Anyway, getting back to what I was saying, failure to squarely face that fact consigns one to a and is self-defeating and destroys the fabric of all reality for them. They will ultimately end up not being able to make sense of anything. Unlike us, because we're making sense of the chaos here. This is a good
6101. You can call anytime of day. I won't get out Mr. Sherman's number because he's a private individual. I don't care. I lose the phone about every 2 months. And hopefully, prayerfully, I will keep hold of this one because money's tight right now. I'm learning how to hold on to things, Mr. Sherman.
good. But do you have any questions, Bill?
Oh my gosh. One comment I really want to make is that two things. We're going to come back to how I feel and what I think about things. But I think about the analogy of the multiple doors behind door number one, door number two. Of course, this is a reference to 1970s and 80s television show, Let's Make a Deal. And it's reemerged. It's actually quite good. But the point is that sounded like, I'm sure that's the analogy you're making, that we're making a deal. Let's try to find the best thing that works for us. Or let's just be random. And if we know what the truth is from the word, there's no, I'm not trying to reduce your analogy to rubble, but what I'm trying to say is that that's what I thought immediately, that we play Let's Make a Deal with God daily. God for me has been a wishing well, at least the last, since about 45, 46 years since when I learned how to pray. Or 20, whenever I got the first Bible from me. It was a Gideon's Bible. Well, it was Old and New Testament. We've had a discussion, like you can't have just one or the other. It's the whole word from God. No other comments. This is a worthy effort. I'd like to thank the people who are watching. Oops, I keep knocking this like crazy. Shane Mathern, Michael Hemphill, Al Telpin, my Aunt Candy Clark, Justin Chapin, Sean Terrebonne, Gene Thibodeau, Landon Staley. Hope things go well for you, man. Go back to golf. Jimmy Kaysen. Definitely Miss Ann Pinnick McKinney. You remember Miss Ann? She worked with Mr. Earl in the DA's office. I go to church with Miss Ann. Lovely, beautiful, wonderful person. Miss you, Miss Ann. Tana Marie Robichaud Bonnet. That's a lot of names. Tana Marie Robichaud Bonnet. Quentin Lesage. We can't do this whenever we have like 150 people, but we certainly don't. Joyce Domingue Landry. She's a wonderful lady. Always supports me. Michael Drake. And Rick Martin, to our knowledge, if it ever happened before, we don't know, but he was very kind. He says amen, I think, yesterday. Kelly Ledoux, Julius Craig. Michelle Teal is not watching. I sent her a message. She was one of the people that was very kind. She'd like me to email the YouTube videos. And now that we did that first YouTube live, prayerfully, Soli Deo Gloria Ministries, or something like that. No, just to God be the glory.
To God be the glory alone. To God alone be the glory.
To God alone be the glory. Anything else, Mr. Sherman?
No, I agree with you, that to God alone be the glory. There's no reason for our existing except to glorify God.
Special birthday wishes to Pastor Mac in Odessa. I almost said back home. I almost caught myself. It's like I was home in Odessa. Odessa was home for a year. It's a great store as well. I hope your dad's not watching this, so then the surprise be gone. No, that's all we have to say for today. Thank you. God bless.
Have a good day.
Yes, sir.